Oh, we're back. It's a Monday edition of PFT PM, post 4th of July weekend. Did you have the same issue that I had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? You didn't know what day it was. Isn't that a nice little escape from reality? Don't we all need a little escape from reality right about now? You don't know what day it is. Now, at some level, especially now that I'm on the wrong side of 60, that can be concerning, but it was just kind of a nice, refreshing, you know what? I'm not sure what day it is, and I don't care. It was nice. I hope everybody had a great and safe holiday. Ate a little too much, drank a little too much, but had a very good time Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, if that is indeed what those 3 days were. Oh, and by the way, it was old school PFT. I gave the writers the weekend off and I just took over. I don't know how many stories I posted, maybe 9 a day. It's just part of my routine. Like when I'm sitting there watching TV, watching a movie, watching whatever, post something, post something, post something. There was plenty of stuff still to get to, things left over from the week that was, things that maybe we otherwise wouldn't post if it was a busier time of the year, but we kept the engine fed and carried you through Friday, Saturday, and Sunday if you were indeed paying attention to your non-work sites when you aren't working. And hopefully most of you were able to take that weekend off. And for me, again, it's not, well, don't tell anybody, but it's really not work. And I probably would do it even if I wasn't making any money at it. That's probably not something that I should be saying out loud. All right, let's get to it. And I know that Gary, who's producing today, probably wishes this was not topic A, but I think it's something to keep an eye on because there's always more going on behind the scenes than what meets the eye. And there's always trial balloons and PR plays and test markets and focus groups. And look, the Commanders changed their name, obviously, 5 years ago. The prior name was a dictionary-defined slur. The best argument made about the prior name of the franchise came from Charles Krauthammer, conservative commentator who made the case in an item for the Washington Post in 2013 that times change, language changes and evolves. Words that were once acceptable become unacceptable through the mere passage of time. And it was as simple as that. The prior name had become outdated. The prior name had become associated with something offensive. It's that simple. It's that simple. But nothing's ever quite that simple. And now that the name has been gone for 5 years, when the commander-in-chief has addressed it twice now, once in late April and again more forcefully on Sunday, I wouldn't have changed the name, the president said. And, implicit within that is the notion that maybe they should go back to that name. And he did make a salient point as it relates to the current name becoming better if they win. And I think the current name is better perceived now than it was a year ago because they made it to the NFC Championship and they're now one of the short-list teams to make it to the Super Bowl in 2025. But, and this is why when he mentioned it back in April, we didn't cover it, but we're covering it now because what's happened since he mentioned it in late April? Number one, a deal was struck between the Commanders and DC Mayor Muriel Bowser to put a new stadium at the site of the old RFK facility. Number two, the DC Council has been dragging their feet as it relates to the very important process of approving that deal. As the deal was negotiated, July 15 is the deadline to get the deal approved by the DC Council to keep it on track for a stadium opening in 2030. They're not going to get it finalized by July 15. They're having public hearings on the issue, July 29 and 30. That alone tells us they're probably not going to approve it by July 15 if they're not having public hearings until 2 weeks after. Then they go on recess until the middle of September. Well, they're not going to meet that deadline. So one of the things that came up last week, at a time when the Commanders had a dinner for the members of the DC Council at an upscale Georgetown restaurant, the DC Council Chair Phil Mendelson acknowledged that there's talk that maybe the Commanders, who are frustrated by the delays, will go to the most powerful man in the country, who happens to reside in DC, who happens to be the one who said yesterday they shouldn't have changed their name. And so the question becomes, and look, Everything in politics is give and take. What are you going to do for me? What do you want me to do for you? What can I get out of you? What do you expect me to do? How else can you get it? How important is this thing that you want me to do? If the Commanders go to him hat in hand, trying to get him to get this deal done, and he has some things he wants, possibly including changing the name back to what it was, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? And I know Josh Harris, the owner of the team, has said they're not going back to the old name. Well, his predecessor once said, never will the name change, and you can put it in all caps. Never. 7 years later, the name changed. So, look, it's kind of quaint to think that there was a time in America where what you said mattered, and what you said was basically in concrete and never changing. People change their minds all the time now. What you said yesterday, if it no longer fits with what it is you're trying to do, you abandon it. You walk away from it. You do something completely different. It's just the way it is now. I'm not saying I like it. I'm just acknowledging reality. So the reality of the situation, if the Commanders do indeed go to the president to try to get him to get the DC Council to approve the deal, or to come up with some other way to fund the stadium through taxpayer money, I know that doesn't necessarily mesh with the whole, we're cutting back on excessive spending. But hey, if he comes out of the process with a stadium named after him, and also if he's able to declare to the members of the base, most of whom would want the old name, I'm sorry, it's not a political commentary, it's a political fact, then maybe that's what he wants. And by the way, the story I wrote today about it was as basic, simple, down the middle, meat and potatoes as it could be. And of course, within 5 minutes, I got a stick to sports email. And let me just say something about that. To anyone out there who is inclined to tell those of us in the media who have actual platforms that we've earned over time, we don't just fall into these jobs. It's the product of a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of desire and drive. Most of the people who rise to the level that they have a massive platform in the media space are type A personalities. Do you really think telling us to stick to sports is going to work? Have you ever considered that, the stick to sports crowd? Whether it's the athletes or whether it's the people in prominent media positions, what do you think we're going to do when you say stick to sports? Do you think we're going to go like Eddie Murphy in Raw? Okay. And walk away? Okay. Because you said so, because you asked nicely, or because you didn't ask nicely, we're gonna stick to. I mean, it's a waste of your time. And if anything, for anybody else out there that's anything like me, and I've tried to explain this to people, the more you tell me not to do something, the more determined I am to do it. And yes, it is deep-seated. And yes, it's probably evidence of one or more personality flaws or disorders. I don't care. It's who I am. I'm fully formed now. I ain't changing. You tell me not to do something, damn it, I'm going to do it just to show you that I can. All right, so stick to sports. Stick to sports. This is sports. The name of a sports team is sports, people. All right, boy, if you didn't like that last one, you're going to love this. This is also sports and politics and life. The big, beautiful bill that was passed last week. One of the provisions, as it came out of the House, would have really complicated the process of getting the full tax benefit when you buy a team. Now, I will not pretend to know anything about tax law and write-offs and depreciation of intangible assets, but the bottom line is the rule that's on the books allows someone who buys a team to take 100% of the value of the intangible assets, which is mainly player contracts and media contracts, and write them off over the course of 15 years. So initially, as it was conceived, the big, beautiful bill was going to reduce that 100% down to zero. It was going to go away. A middle ground was reached for the House version, 50% down from 100%. It would have resulted in hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue for the federal government and hundreds of millions of dollars in tax loss by the owners of teams. And I think it would have had a tendency to drive down the value of teams, because part of this overall question of, can I afford this? The tax benefits on the back end become part of the question of, can I afford this? So it would have been bad for NFL owners. And when the big, beautiful bill was finally passed, there wasn't much coverage about what happened. So over the weekend, I got in touch with somebody who would know, and I was told that the provision fell out of the Senate version of the big, beautiful bill, and then it went back to the House. It wasn't put back in. So status quo is still in place for NFL owners now and in the future. And I think it wouldn't have applied to current owners. It would have applied going forward to people who buy teams in the future, but still would have driven down the value of teams. It would have driven down what owners who are selling would end up getting. Now, it's fascinating because when this was first reported on by the New York Times, there were unnamed owners who believed that this was punitive, that this was the president trying to get the owners. And I tend to think they're right. And I recall what Stephen A. Smith told Jon Stewart on The Daily Show on June 9, that when the president was trying to buy the Buffalo Bills more than a decade ago, he vowed to Stephen A. Smith and presumably the others, if they keep me from doing this, I will run for president and I will get them back. And there is a belief that this is part of the effort to try to get them back. Now, it didn't work, but it makes you wonder what else might be out there aimed at getting them back. And it helps explain this weird minefield that the NFL is currently tiptoeing through. No sudden moves. Don't get yourself on the radar screen. Don't get yourself on the wrong end of an executive order. But it's just part of this adventure now. This suspenseful, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And it dovetails with what I was talking about earlier. Because if the current president is determined to create some chaos, one way to create chaos is to squeeze a team that wants to get a deal done for a DC stadium into changing its name to the name that it dropped 5 years ago. It's a display of power over the most powerful sport in the country. Stick to sports. One more from the big, beautiful bill. And this one is it's strange to me. And when you see the social media reaction, people just have no clue about how this works. And I really don't have much of a clue. I do know this, though. The new law affects gamblers who have a habit of winning at a fairly small margin, right? You bet a lot, you'll win just a little bit more than you lose. And at the end of the day, you're going to owe more in taxes, because now you can only deduct 90% of your losses instead of 100% of your losses. And it's as simple as this. I win 100,000, I lose 100,000. It's a wash. Oh, wait, you can only deduct $90,000 now. So you actually made $10,000. You win and you lose. And it would be ludicrous to tax people only on their gambling winnings and to give them no credit for their losses. If I bet $5 and win, and I bet $5 and lose, and if my net is zero from my winnings and my losses, why should I pay taxes on anything? My net is zero. Your gambling income should always be the total amount earned over the total amount spent. That's a no-brainer. And I don't know how this got into the bill. And, there's plenty of wringing of hands and gnashing of teeth about what it means for professional gamblers. And I still don't know how it hurts the House, because if you're scaring off the people who were consistently winning, if you can slam the door on the people who were winning, if all of a sudden being a professional gambler who wins isn't an attractive profession, isn't that good for you? Don't you just want the casual gamblers who are going to lose, and they accept they're going to lose? They treat the $1,000 they take to Las Vegas as part of the entertainment expense and just lose? Don't you want that? So the other thing that confuses me, because the DraftKings and the FanDuels of the world are extremely rich and they have the lobbyists in place. How did they not block this? If this is bad for them, I just don't think it's as bad for them as some are saying. Because professional gamblers who are winning just enough over the long haul, they're taking money away from the books. They're taking money away from the house. The house always wins. Well, there's no reason to be a professional gambler if that's true. Some are smart enough to crack the code and make money. And if those folks get scared off by this new tax provision, how's that not good for the house? I'm sorry. I know I'm just a stupid guy who talks about sports and I don't understand all of the esoteric nuances of gambling. But if you're scaring off the people who are consistently winning, how is that bad for the house? Don't you want a bunch of stupid ass gamblers who just accept that they're going to lose and just give you their money? Do you really want the smart guys in there who know how to win? And if this provision scares off a lot of those people, it's got to be good for the house. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because now what you're going to have, and I think we've never seen a bill like this that had so much stuff in it, right? Now you're going to see, as the individual members of Congress who blindly voted for, I'll stick to sports, who blindly voted for it because that's what they were expected to do because of the letter after their name, as they realize that it might not be good for the people they represent, you're going to see legislation get introduced to try to fix some of these things. And I think already legislators from Nevada are going to be looking for a way to do this, assuming that, assuming it is bad for business. I'm not so sure it's bad for business to scare away the people who consistently win. All right. Chase Claypool in the news because of a social media post indicating that he recovered from an injury, a toe injury in 2024. That's why he didn't play, and he's ready to make a comeback. And, it's so easy to write someone off because they washed out of the NFL. But this is a guy who was pretty talented his first couple of seasons. I don't know what went haywire with him in Pittsburgh, but he fell out of favor there. He got traded to the Bears for what became the 32nd overall pick in the draft, because that was the year Miami lost their first rounder due to the rampant tampering with Tom Brady and Sean Payton. The Steelers ended up with essentially a first rounder. Joey Porter Jr. became the pick. Claypool did not do well with the Bears, and I think he was with the Bills for a little period of time, and he's just been gone. 27. If he's healthy and if he's driven and if he's motivated to get the most out of his abilities, he's still got some gas in the tank. It'll be surprising to see him come back and play at a high level, but I don't know. Wouldn't somebody bring him in and see what he does in the 40? See how he catches passes, see how he carries himself, how he conducts himself, what kind of vibe he's giving off? I remember when, after his first season with the Steelers, somebody who works for the team-owned media operation referred to diva-like tendencies. That was the first warning that this may not work out. And again, the Steelers do a great job of drafting talented receivers, but some of them, I don't know, some of them don't pan out from a standpoint of team orientation and selflessness and, not being a pain in the ass to the point where they trade you like they did with Claypool, like they did with George Pickens, like they did with Antonio Brown before that. They've had plenty of great receivers that they've drafted, but they've also had more than a few guys who have become problems and have become headaches. And it may just be maturity. And it may be that he saw his football career pass before his eyes. But I know the kid's got talent, and it'll be interesting to see if he gets a shot. And look, I'm always cognizant of what I say about guys getting second chances, because you give a guy a second chance, you're taking away someone else's first chance who never squandered his chance. It's a zero-sum game. If you're going to give Chase Claypool a roster spot, somebody else is losing his. But if Claypool is good enough to play, and it is a meritocracy, see what he can do. Let him run. Let him catch. Let him sit down and talk to you across the table and get an idea of whether or not he's learned from whatever it was that caused his career to go sideways. One more item before we get to a few questions. Travis Kelce had some interesting comments to the Bussin' with the Boys podcast about Travis Hunter. Apparently, there's no club out there that guys with the first name of Travis look out for each other, because Travis Kelce, and I hadn't really thought about this, and at some level it seems overly simplistic, but maybe it's not. If Travis Hunter is going to play both ways, first full-time two-way player since Concrete Charlie Chuck Bednarik in 1960. If Hunter is going to play offense all the time and defense all the time, setting aside whether or not he's got the ability to do it, whether he's got the time to get ready for both offense and defense each and every week. John Harbaugh, the Ravens, said before the draft there aren't enough hours in the day to do it. If he can do all that, what is the strategy for dealing with this guy who is two players in one? And Kelce's point is very simple. When he's playing defense, whoever he's covering, go. Take him 50 yards. Make him run down the field full speed, jog back into position, and do it again, like when they did the skating in Miracle. Again, Herb Brooks, again. Wear him out, and it's time to go play offense. What's he going to do on the offensive side of the ball when he's still trying to get his breath back from being run all over the place on the defensive side? Now, are you going to design an offense where when you come to the line of scrimmage, whoever is being covered by Travis Hunter, he kind of falls out of the play and he's just the guy who's expected to take Hunter down the field? Like, I don't know how you build that into your offense, but if part of your goal for neutralizing a two-way player, and we haven't seen this in modern football, if the goal is to physically wear him out, then yeah, you have keys based upon the formation and the route changes, and the guy that Hunter is facing takes off, and the rest of the play adjusts accordingly. It's not all that complicated to adjust the play, to adjust the offense based on where Travis Hunter is. It's like targeting the backup who comes in to play corner. This is the guy we're going to target. Wherever he is, we're throwing to his guy. Well, wherever Travis Hunter is, we're going to make him run, and we're going to wear him out. It's just something to watch. It's part of the fascination of having a guy who seems to be good enough to play both ways. What all does that entail? It's mental and it's physical. And when you get to a game, it's ultra physical. You get a hot day in Jacksonville and you're running him up and down the field when he's out there playing defense. Good luck playing offense. And then how do the Jaguars adjust to that? Do they just use him part of the time on defense? So I hope he gets a chance to play full-time offense and defense. And it's not unfair to target him with guys that are going to make him run. It's part of the game. It's part of the chess match. But this is a pretty simple checkers move in the chess match, if that's what teams end up doing. All right. Let's answer a few questions before we wrap up this Monday edition of PFT PM from the Mailbag. Any update on the Chiefs stadium decision? What are you hearing is most likely? Look, it's down to Kansas and Missouri. And the Chiefs are going to have to make a decision at some point. They asked for more time. In Kansas, the deadline was June 30. I don't know that they've officially granted an extension, but hey, if you want the Chiefs, you're going to keep the window open. And for the Chiefs, it's very simple. A $1.15 billion renovation of Arrowhead Stadium or a $3 billion or so domed stadium in Kansas that possibly brings a Super Bowl to the region. And the Chiefs have said they'd like to have a domed stadium. I'm sure the fans that got frostbite on that night that the Chiefs hosted the Dolphins in the wild card round of the playoffs would have wished that game was inside of a dome, but I digress. Or I don't. That weather advantage. Hey, that's a very different game if it's Dolphins at the Chiefs and it's 72 degrees. Dolphins have a better chance to do what Dolphins do in 72 than if they're playing in whatever it was, minus 20, minus 10, minus 15, dangerously cold, frostbite galore. You're giving that up if you go indoors. But you're getting a Super Bowl. You're getting a new stadium, state-of-the-art, keeping up with the Joneses. Everybody's got to have that new stadium. Got to have the new best in class for this, that, or the other. So I think that for now, they're just going to try to get the best possible deal. Keep leveraging Missouri against Kansas and Kansas against Missouri. Get your best possible deal and then call the ball. But I think they'd probably like to go to Kansas deep down. Deep down. If they can come up with whatever their contribution is going to be, which means maximizing the public contribution and paying as little as possible because they pay a lot less for a renovation of Arrowhead. They're going to pay more for a new stadium, but it may be a lot better in the long run, and they may make more money in the long run, especially because the dome stadiums can have events all year long. Red Zone UK, a.k.a. Tom Marshall, does the NFL's access to the gambling company data enable it to suppress any crisis before they happen? You know, I started down that path when we were talking about the latest NBA scandal. God, I already forget the name of the player who's being investigated by federal prosecutors. The Eastern District of New York, by the way, headquartered in Brooklyn, that's become kind of the hot spot for all of these gambling investigations. Multiple, all the way back to Tim Donaghy, multiple gambling investigations by the federal authorities have originated in the Eastern District of Virginia. Malik Beasley, I think that's right. He's the guy who's currently being investigated. And, you know, when we were talking about this last week, I mentioned that the NFL's pivot from hating gambling to loving gambling includes this clunky justification that, well, we need to be in business with the sports books so they can tell us when our guys are betting when and where they shouldn't be betting. Okay, fine. But that relationship also creates the potential for the NFL doing this. No. We don't want, we don't want to hear about that the day that Bijan Robinson was sick, but they didn't tell anybody he was sick, that there was an unnatural amount of betting activity on his unders for that day. We don't need to know that. We don't want any threats to the integrity of the game to come to light. Even if they're there, see, they can be there, but if you manage to keep anyone from knowing about it, is it really a threat to the integrity of the game? It's the tree that falls in the woods and no one is there to hear it. I hate to be that cynical, but I think it's more realistic than anything else. And I'm not accusing anybody of doing anything. I'm just saying, if you've got these relationships, these very cozy relationships where the sports books are paying you a bunch of money, and part of the justification to the world is, oh, we get to find out when guys are betting and they shouldn't be betting. It's one thing to have an investigation into whether or not Calvin Ridley was doing parlays that included the Falcons when he was away from the team in Florida and not even connected to it. He gets busted. Other guys like Jamison Williams, he was betting when he shouldn't have been betting if you're in the facility. Remember that rule? If you're in the facility, you can't bet on other sports. If you walk outside, you can. It's just stupid. That's one thing, to have the sports books rat out the players, which is what they're doing. They're ratting out the players of the NFL because the NFL has that pipeline. That pipeline also can be useful because you can turn the, is that the way it would work? You turn the valve and you shut the pipeline. And we don't want to know about unusual betting activity when, you know, a team has successfully lied about a guy's true injury status. We don't want to know about that. Just speculation for me, not accusing anyone of anything. Callum Simons, did you ever watch NFL Europe and why did it end? I remember when the original NFL Europe came to be. 1991, the World League of American Football was the name of it. And I recall I just graduated from law school. My wife and I, we weren't married at the time. We went to Myrtle Beach for the weekend. It was a quick drive down, 3 days, got horribly sunburned, came back, got home on the Monday night of Memorial Day weekend and turned on the TV and watched the World League of American Football. And it was just like I felt with the USFL in 1983, 8 years earlier. It's football. I love football. This isn't the NFL. And they had innovations like they had a helmet cam that was stuck inside. Remember they had those kind of face masks? They had that face mask style that was kind of different, futuristic at the time. I wanted to be all in with the World League of American Football, and I wasn't. And from time to time, I mean, if nothing else was on, I'd watch those games. And it went through various iterations. There were European teams and American teams. And you know what happened was, at the end of the day, it just didn't make enough money. especially after 9/11 and security costs increased around the world, these games being played in Europe. I thought it almost went away, 2002, 2003. And it was eventually in 2007, they just decided we're not making money off of this. And who cares? Look, I know from time to time people will say, and I've made the case, for a developmental league in the NFL where you can have quarterbacks get reps and get better. You can have officials get reps and get better. Coaches get reps and get better. GMs get reps and get better. Everybody gets reps and get better. And then they come to the NFL and they thrive. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, there's 53 roster spots. At the end of the day, there's 32 head coaching jobs. The owners don't care about properly giving people experience. They go out into the crucible of competition, and the best ones win the jobs. It doesn't matter whether you're some great story about a guy who was bagging groceries at the Piggly Wiggly and got enough reps in NFL Europe to finally thrive in the NFL. It doesn't matter. Somebody's going to play quarterback for the St. Louis Rams in 1999. It ended up being Kurt Warner, and it helped that he had played in NFL Europe. But if it hadn't been him, it would have been somebody else. And from the NFL's perspective, they don't care who it is. And if a good story happens to bubble up out of, the primordial ooze of football, so be it. But they're not compelled. Now, if they were making money, they would do it. And they would say, oh, we're supporting the people to have all these second chances and develop it. If they were making money, they could say whatever. They would do it if it would make money. If a minor league was projected to make sufficient profit to justify its existence and also would not undermine the NFL, that's the other problem too. You don't want, if you have an NFL junior, you don't want to take away from NFL senior. But if they thought you could have a farm system where you've got NFL minor league action that's happening during football season, that's the argument I've made in the past. You have a farm system like baseball, and you have teams that run the same offense and defense, and you have players who can come up and they're ready to go. They're all part of the same family, and you pepper them throughout the country in cities that are far too small to justify an NFL team. It would make sense if it made money. And if they thought it would make money, they would do it. But again, you don't want to undermine the local NFL team, the closest geographical NFL team. You don't want fans to be more invested in their NFL minor team than in the NFL major team that the league wants people to support. Paul Flanagan, are you going to Dublin for the Vikings-Steelers game? When the schedule first came out and it was Vikings back-to-back, Ireland against the Steelers and London against the Browns, Matt Casey suggested that we possibly go over for the week. The problem is Sims can't do it because Sims does college football. And I don't want to go there without him. I don't want it to be just me. I think he and I need to go there together. Ideally, it's something we do in the off season for a week and do a bunch of appearances and shows and get to know the folks there, get to see the folks there. I feel like I know a lot of them that I hear from via email. We'd love to go over there. It's just during the season, it's too hard to do, especially because Sims does college football. And I'm not bitter about that. I'm just being realistic. I think he'll be back down to, 1 day a week, 2 days a week once the season starts. Get ready for that. Don't complain. Don't complain. You have fair warning that that's what's going to happen. And last year it worked out fine. We had Devin McCourty, we had Michael Hawley, we had Rodney Harrison, we had the full rotation, and it worked well. It actually made me enjoy the thing that I used to hate, the Joint Mega Picks podcast, because Chris and I would do 2 hours on Thursday morning, and then boom, we'd go right into that after like a 1 hour break. 3 hours of each other is a little much. And since I don't have access to him as much as I usually do, that's a nice little bonus. So the Picks podcast is a lot more fun when Chris isn't available. But that's the bottom line. He's not available to make the trip. I don't want to make the trip without him. I think it's something we need to do together, and I think we'd have a great time if and when that ever happens. Last one from Wasp49. Do you think Jon Gruden will coach in the NFL ever again? I don't know, because there's two complications for Jon Gruden. Complication one is the thing that caused him to leave the Raiders during the 2021 season. the emails that were leaked by someone to the Wall Street Journal. And then when that didn't get him to walk away, the second batch that went to the New York Times, that did the trick. Inappropriate emails that he sent years before he was the coach of the Raiders. He was working for ESPN at the time, communicating with Bruce Allen, who at the time was the GM or executive VP or whatever of the Washington franchise. That's one potential impediment. The other potential impediment is his ongoing lawsuit against the NFL, which is still pending before the Nevada Supreme Court on the question of whether or not he's going to have to go to the secret rigged kangaroo court of arbitration or be able to litigate in open court the question of basically who ordered the code red, who took him out with these supposedly secret documents from the Washington investigation. And as I've said many times, it's an important question because somebody undermined the integrity of the 2021 season by taking him out 5 weeks in. They could have done this in June and given the Raiders a chance to hire a coach for the 2021 season, or they could have said, we're going to wait until after the season. We're not going to undermine the integrity of the season by forcing this guy out 5 weeks in. They still made it to the wild card round and almost beat the Bengals, who went to the Super Bowl without Jon Gruden. What would they have done that year if they would have had Jon Gruden the whole year? And if you have people betting on, the Raiders making it to the Super Bowl, you've undermined the integrity of those bets by taking him out when you did. I still have a problem with that. But my point is this. I think the first thing would probably not be an impediment if somebody wanted to hire him. The second thing, that makes it a little harder because of the thing we talked about most of the week 2 weeks ago. The very basic reality of collusion in the NFL and not making the league unhappy with any specific team, not doing anything the league doesn't want you to do. I have a feeling that the league would frown upon someone hiring Jon Gruden to be a head coach. Now, he's done some consulting. And as it relates to the first thing, I talked to somebody who is in a position to know. And I was told that, most players, when they hear about the Gruden emails, they just kind of shrug and they say worse stuff all the time in the locker room. It's no big deal. And again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think it would be easier for a team that wanted to hire him to get around that than to get around the thing that, you may have some angry folks up to the very top of 345 Park Avenue if and when someone would hire Jon Gruden to be an offensive coordinator or a head coach again. And I think offensive coordinator would make sense. So we'll see how it goes. And a lot of it depends upon that lawsuit. And maybe they could settle that lawsuit and he'd get back in. I don't know. But remember, it was a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago, there was a story, I think, from ESPN that his desire was to burn it all down, that he wants to go after the NFL. I mean, if he's still got that attitude, it's hard for the NFL to give anyone the nod when it comes to Jon Gruden. All right. And before I go, I didn't mention this off the top, but I'm aware, as we all should be, of what's going on in Texas. It is incomprehensible. There was flooding up in my hometown a few weeks ago. It was nothing like what happened in Texas on the Guadalupe River. 30 feet it rose in an hour. Those poor girls that got washed away from the camp that they were at, dozens dead. The number changes every 10 minutes, it seems like. And they're still finding people. You never know what you can trust on social media, but I saw yesterday they found a couple of girls 27 feet up in a tree. So they're still intensively trying to locate survivors. Some of the videos I've seen, your brain doesn't even want to process it. And it's amazing. And it's the power of water. I've seen what flooding can do, but not like that. Not like that. And hopefully it is a 100-year event. I saw it downplayed by someone yesterday as being, nothing we really could have prepared for because it's a 100-year event. I hope that's the case because I hope we don't see stuff like that on a regular basis now. Regardless, it's impossible if you are a human being not to be affected and moved by the stories of bravery, the stories of loss, the stories of agony. I was watching one of the cable channels over the weekend, and the reporter said that as he was there, a father showed up, basically screaming into the void his daughter's name. He wasn't going to find her. But what else do you do if that's your child? That you leave at camp without even the slightest inkling that something like this would happen. So this is the escape from all that stuff that we have to carry around, but it's just horrible. And there's nothing I can say that would even begin to address the situation properly. Good for the Cowboys and the Texans to contribute $500,000 each. And if you are so inclined, we have the links on the website in that story about the Cowboys and Texans donation. If you want to provide some money to the Salvation Army, the American Red Cross to help with relief efforts. When you see the images, it's obvious there are going to be needs that will not be met, cannot be met by whatever public money is available. So if you're inclined to donate, please do so. That is it for today's edition of PFT PM. We'll be back tomorrow with another all-new edition. Until then, check us out around the clock at profootballtalk.com. Hashtag no days off. Hashtag except when we take days off. But we've had a good streak going of PFT PM, and I fully expect to keep it rolling through this week. Thanks again. See you Tuesday. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.